And I guess hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Helping Students Stay, Retention in the Classroom. Looks like there might be a little technical difficulty here, but to our presenters, if thumbs up, if you're able to present and to see me, so that's great. So we at Burlington English are, as always, super proud. For many years now, we've been able to sponsor these wonderful webinars brought to you via our friends at COABE and always with fantastic presenters. My name is Robert Breitbart, Director of Educational Partnerships with Burlington English, and along with my scores and scores of colleagues around the country, I know that one of the great ways I've found as a former local director to help students stay is to really build as much value in their minds as possible as why they should stay when possibly they have challenges with transportation or childcare or other issues that we have so many reasons for them to stay with us in adult education. And one of the biggest reasons, of course, with WIOA is getting your students future focused early, as soon as they walk into your program, as early as possible, getting them thinking about that this is more than just a place to learn English or get your high school equivalency, but actually it's a place to continue and start or grow your career. And with Burlington English, we provide students with everything they need to know via projectable lessons and blended learning from their teacher. As you see up on the screen, this is our core textbook. And we know that for those teachers all around the country want to help make their lives easier by helping them put that W in WIOA, that workforce. And so as you can see on the screen, we have fantastic materials. So it's more than, once again, just a place to learn English, but really to build our help in adult education to you to start your career or advance your career, and make sure that you explore and pick the right career that's correct for the students, for their participation. And of course, we know if we put everything down on paper, well, we have a better chance of having our goals succeed and be reached. And so we have, as you can see on the screen, our portfolio. So please, I've got scores and scores of colleagues all around the country, would love to help you out with that. And with that, I'll turn it now over to my fantastic Illinois colleagues, Amber and Anita, who are going to do a fantastic job of helping you with retention strategies in your classroom. Ladies, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Robert. We appreciate your sponsorship, and we see a lot of chat comments about their love for Burlington English. So we appreciate you and your company. Hi, everybody. We're so glad to have you joining us today for this extremely important and interesting topic to all of us, helping students stay, retention in the classroom. We're happy to be with you on behalf of COABE today, myself, Anita Kerr, and my colleague, Amber Fornaciari, who's going to be jumping in here in a little bit to join us. And we're just happy that you have joined us. We would love for you to be part of our conversation this morning. So before we get started, we want to learn a little bit about you. So we're going to launch a quick poll. It should show up on your screen in Zoom. There are 2 questions to our poll. We want to know what region of the country you are in, and we want to know about how the temperature feels in your area right now. So we would love for you to answer those 2 questions on our poll. And we'll kind of get a check-in here in a minute and see where we're from. Oh, Joey, you can pick. I'll let you. Yeah, if you're not sure what region you're in, you can take your pick. No worries.
You know, Jenny Ryan in the chat, Anita, she must have known our poll questions because she introduced herself and told us how hot it was in the area.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, the heat's been on our minds, hasn't it? Great. We'll give you just a second more to complete that poll in the Zoom. I love it. Great. It's nice to see so many of you here. I'm going to end the poll here in just a second. Feel free if you need to enter the information in the chat as well. Great. Thank you so much.
Anita, we have so many people in the chat from Chicagoland area or from
I
Illinois.
noticed.
We love you. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for supporting us, and we hope you learned something along the way.
Absolutely. It's lovely to see everybody from all over the country, but I'm seeing Illinois represent. You got it, Jenny. All right. Well, I'm going to end the poll, and we're going to just take a view here to share our results. Ah, look at that. 37% from the Midwest. God bless you all. We've got a nice little representation also from the East and the South. Great. It's lovely to have all of you. And the temperature, let's take a look. Most of us are on the hot side. I love it. Amber and I decided rather than put temperature ranges, we would just give you descriptors of how it feels. So I love that many of you are melting and have been melting. I feel you on that. Great. All right, I'm going to stop that poll. If you need to X out of it on your screen, go ahead. Thanks for sharing a little bit about you. I'll tell you just for a second a little bit about Amber and myself. We are part of the Illinois Professional Development Network. Here in Illinois, we do professional development. We design and offer and do trainings for adult educators just like yourselves. And we're both also adult education teachers in local community colleges in our area. So not only do we work with adult educators through training, but we also are in the classroom ourselves. So this issue of student retention is not an imaginary one for us. This is a real problem that Amber and I both deal with in our own classrooms, just like you. So we're going to hopefully bring a little bit of perspective to this conversation around retention and maybe trigger some new ideas and thoughts for you guys today. So here's our very brief agenda for our next hour together. We're going to briefly kind of give some context around retention for student retention. And then we're going to look at some research. It's important to look at the data, not just know that this is an issue in adult ed, but how is it an issue and where? And then we're going to look specifically, Amber's going to narrow in on what you can do in the classroom. What do you have control over when it comes to working with student retention? So that's what we're going to be working on today. So to set the stage just a little bit, Amber and I have been talking about student retention for a couple of years here in Illinois because our state office made it an important initiative, made it an initiative that they asked the state to look at as a PD network. So we started turning our attention to retention for students. And we immediately chose to concentrate on what teachers could do. Where could teachers have influence over student retention? Now, we know that retention is an issue for for everyone, but part of the issue is not just that it's affecting our data, right? It is. Data suffers, and then sometimes funding is affected, right, when retention goes down. But we also know that it's an issue for students, because when they don't stay, we can't help them reach their goals, and they can't make that next transition step that they're trying to make. So it is about programmatic issues, funding issues, but it's also just about our students and their goals. So we want to be able to talk about and address both of those concerns. So here is your quote of the day. Very briefly, a student is the most important person in a school. A student is not an interruption of our work. The student is the purpose of it. By William Perky. I love this quote because it really helps center our attention where it should be, which is that students do not interrupt us in our development of lessons, for instance. No, without students, we have no purpose for our lessons. There's nothing to be doing without those students. So it is absolutely to our advantage to help them stay in our class. It gives us our purpose, and obviously, of course, it helps those students reach their goals. So it's nice to sometimes have an inspiring little quote to get us going today, and there is yours for the day. So let's talk for a second about retention and think about when we should be thinking about retention. Another word that you sometimes hear used for retention is persistence, right? The idea of students coming into class and staying. So in a 16-week class, let's say, your classes may be different, but let's just pretend you've got a 16-week class coming up. When should we begin thinking about retaining students? The concept of persistence implies they make it to the end, right? But no, yes, you guys have got it. Look at that chat. Exactly right. Before they even enter our class is when we need to start thinking about retention. It's not about who is sticking around in week 8 that I need to start drawing attention to it. Yeah, what happens to the students during intake and orientation? That is when we need to be getting our focus started on retaining our students. So I love that. If you're thinking about making retention a priority in your thinking this year, it can start literally right now, even if your classes have not started yet. So perfect. I love it that you all are on the same page with us in that respect. So when should I be thinking of retention? Literally from the minute you get your class roster. If you're not involved in the orientation or the intake process, maybe the first thing you get is a roster of your students that are coming into your class the first week. That is the minute you can start working on retaining those students before you've even met them. And isn't that a fun idea that I can start concentrating on my students and thinking about their retention in my classroom before I've even laid eyes on them? We're going to be thinking about how I can be looking at my class, what their needs are, and we're going to do that through the lens of two things: the relevant research around persistence and retention, including our own retention. And then we're also going to be looking at specific retention strategies that we can apply. And we'll be doing that in the second half. So we're really going to dive in to what we want to know about retention and how it can be practical for us, right? Not just theoretical. So that's always really important. So before we get too far, I just want to acknowledge that we know many of you are teaching in different kinds of classrooms, right? You may be teaching ESL, you may be teaching math, you might be in person only, you may be in a hybrid classroom or a high flex classroom. You may be teaching beginning reading to ELLs. Whatever you're doing and however you're teaching it in whatever modality, the interesting thing is that we are all dealing with retention as an issue. The issues and considerations that you are addressing in your particular classroom certainly could be dependent a little bit on what you're teaching and who you're teaching and how you're teaching, but everyone faces challenges with retention, right? It's not just a certain kind of class. It's not just the online classes that suffer retention issues. So we just wanted to acknowledge that up front, that we know that all of you are teaching in different modalities, different content areas, but absolutely all of us are dealing with retention as a concern. And you guys, we know it's a complicated issue. There are countless reasons that your students are not persisting through a term. It is as individual as the individual students in your classrooms, right? That's a fact. As many students as you have staring you in the face through Zoom or in your room, that's the unique number of reasons why students might not persist, because it is a complicated problem. So because of that, we are going to focus today specifically on what teachers can do to impact student retention. Now, do we know that there are broader issues surrounding retention that are outside of our control as teachers? Yes. So I'm going to say that again. There are factors that affect your students' retention that fall outside of your control. Okay, we know that. So even though that's not the focus of our webinar today, we are going to give you just a second to think about the factors that are outside of your control. Okay, so think about this as like your 5 minutes chance to vent. Okay, you know how sometimes when I'm going to ask you to, I only want you to think about this, and your brain's going, yes, but, and thinking of all the other things. This is your chance to get all those other things out. So we've put 3 categories of barriers on the wall here: academic, personal for students, and programmatic. That would be things about the way your program is organized or designed that cause barriers for students. Fabulous. I'm seeing some flowing through the chat already. Yeah, pick one category and name 1 or 2 barriers that you for a fact know that your students face. Something that is outside of your control. You wish you could fix it, but you can't. Yeah. Oh, thank you for these. I'm seeing so many. If you want to just kind of scan through the chat, you can see all of your colleagues' responses. I see homelessness. I see work. I see issues with kids, childcare inconsistencies, homelessness again, transportation. Yeah. Oh, internet connectivity. Fabulous. Here's what we want you to do. You can keep putting those in the chat. What we'd like you to do is measure them off a little bit against some of these common responses that Amber and I get when we present about retention, either in Illinois or on a national scale. This is what people tell us often. So compare your thoughts with what you see on the screen. Do they match up? Do you have things that you see that don't show up on the screen that you're like, this is my barrier? And put it in the chat for us. Maybe you see something on the screen that's a big surprise to you, like, oh, I hadn't thought of that one. Maybe my students do see that as a barrier. So we'll just give you a couple of seconds to reflect as you compare your barriers with your students to the responses that you see on the screen. Great. Thank you so much for all of that. I know that sometimes when we ask you to confine your thinking to just what do teachers have control over, it's hard because we want to go, yes, but my students also struggle with this. One of the things, though, that happens is if we concentrate too much on the things that we don't have control over as teachers, then we feel like we have no efficacy. There's nothing we can do to make a change. So what we want to do today is, now that we've kind of gotten all of these barriers out there, we recognize them, we see them, we acknowledge the truth of them. We also then want to stop and say, okay, I know that this is legit. All of these barriers that are on the screen and that you have put in the chat are legitimate concerns. However, today, just for our remaining time, we're only going to focus on where we have influence and impact. Where can we really make a change? So we're going to look at some research, national and some more local to Illinois. And before we do that, I just want to remind you that when we look at data, we're just dealing with numbers. Sometimes it's hard to remember that those numbers represent people, right? When we start talking about hundreds of thousands or these high percentages, remember, every one of those numbers is one of our students, our collective students. So what I'd love for you to do is just stop for about 10 seconds, and I want you to think of a past student, maybe in the recent year, that you lost, quote unquote, right? You had them in class and they didn't persist. They dropped for whatever reason. And maybe that student was really close to your heart for some reason. I'd like you to just think about who that student is and put their name in your head and keep that there while we talk about all of this data, because it will help personalize, I think, some of these bigger numbers. So let's look at some of this data with the proviso that you're thinking of it through the lens of who are these students. So here's our first bit of retention research here on the left. This is from Florida, 2020 data. Approximately 58% of adult learners enroll for less than 6 months, okay? 6 months or less. So this is enrollment that we would say is not long enough for them to achieve their goal. Quantitative studies on retention that were done in around 2011 show attrition rates as high as 54%, and attrition in this case meaning loss, right? Or we lost them. So as high as half. And I can say that we have seen data from our state and others that also matches that. Here's a 2012 paper indicating that many adult learners do not persist or participate in enough instruction to measurably improve their skills. I imagine many of you are out there nodding because yes, we understand that. We see them, they want to, they have the desire to, but they don't stay long enough to actually show a gain in their skills, whether on an assessment test or some other format of measure. And about a quarter of learners separate before they complete one educational functioning level. And that's that data piece that your programs are looking for to show that gain from one level to the next, because that's where our programs are getting their funding. So these are significant research pieces that back us up that retention is important and it's also an issue. Here's a piece of national data COABE was kind enough to supply to us a couple of years ago from fiscal year 2019. National data show that adult ed retention rate of about 31% for students who did not achieve a measurable skill gain. Meaning if they did not show some sort of gain on an assessment, 31% of them stayed, but the majority of them left. And the implication here, if we read into that data, is that students need to see achievement. They need to feel that they are making progress in order for them to be encouraged to stay. And this makes perfect sense to us, right? We understand that instinct, and it's here the research is bearing that out. Older data from the 90s that absolutely implied the crucial importance of the first few weeks of class. Several studies from a couple of years ago were showing that the highest attrition rates or the highest rates of loss were coming earliest in the program. The implication meaning that they're leaving early, not midterm and after. And our data in Illinois, we found in the last couple of years when we analyzed it from fiscal year 20 and 21, supported that idea. We were seeing that many students were being lost early in their participation, again, often before day one, meaning between their registration and intake and the first day of class, we were losing them then. Now that could absolutely be an issue where maybe they didn't understand what they were signing up for until they got to orientation and thought, oh goodness, this isn't for me, right? There could be issues like that. But it also could be that maybe they were afraid. They were nervous. They didn't know what to expect on day one, and maybe they just didn't go. And when that happens, it of course is very hard to get them back. So yes, I'm seeing a couple of comments in the chat completely. It takes some time to get to know students. And so we're going to talk about some things, thinking about what could happen between roster, you get your roster, and day one. Can we make class more inviting for our students before we even lay eyes on them? Could you send an email? Could you send a text to your class roster introducing yourself? Could you include a video showing who you are with happiness in your face, explaining how excited you are to see them? All of those kinds of things, again, it may not fix the problem, but it can certainly help the problem of losing some students between orientation and day one. Yeah, I'm seeing lots of people suggesting things like, yeah, I send a text before class. That's very exciting. That's a kind of thing we need to be thinking about. If we have not been thinking about how to make our students welcome before day one, let's start thinking about that now. right? That's an exciting opportunity for us to think about how to do this a little differently. Yeah. And I'm seeing a comment here in the chat, like they feel like if they miss the first day, they blew it and they can't come, right? And so maybe there's some idea about grace or what's the attendance policy that needs to be explained in a welcome email. And absolutely, I love it. I'm seeing some people suggesting I'm already doing this for my students. So that's wonderful. If that's you, you're on the right track. And if you've not done that before, maybe this is something you can be thinking about. We also know that we tend to lose a lot of students within the first few weeks, even before they hit their 12 hours of attendance. So we know those first few classes are vital. Students are looking to make community. They're looking to form connections with you and others. And what you do in class on the first few days can be absolutely vital to building community as a group. If you think about maybe your college life experience or the first class period in a new high school semester, what do you guys often do? You read the syllabus, right? Can you think of anything more boring than reading the syllabus, right? So maybe there are ways that we as teachers can do what needs to be done in terms of getting students oriented to a class the first week. But what else could we build in for community building, for encouragement, for making people feel at home? Thinking about those things that we can incorporate as well to address some of these research concerns we're seeing where we lose students so early. I would also encourage you, if you're one of those people who likes to multitask, please feel free to scan through the chat in the Zoom. There are some wonderful ideas floating through here from your colleagues, and I would encourage you to not just listen to me and Amber, but also be taking advantage of all the ideas that your colleagues are giving you in the chat. Now, I do want to just do a quick takeaway from some of that research. If numbers and percentages kind of blew past you, totally fine. Here are the key takeaways if you just want to pay attention to these. Number one, all adult educators face the challenge of retaining their students. It's a national issue. It's at your state level. It's down to your individual classroom level. You are not alone in struggling with student retention. Second takeaway, students who do not see personal successes achieved or any kind of goal that they have set accomplished are more likely to leave class. That is just a fact. If you can't help students recognize where they are improving, how they have achieved, even if it's not their big goal, can you show them how they're achieving some smaller step goals? If they're not seeing that, those are the ones more likely to leave. So that'll help us start thinking about what we could be doing in our classrooms. And third takeaway, the earliest class sessions are when we lose the most students. The earliest class sessions. So what can you be doing from roster through day 1, 2, 3? What can you be doing to encourage your students to stay? Again, it's not going to be a be-all and end-all solution for every student, but we can have impact on some of those areas. Reminder, you will get these slides in an email from COABE afterwards. And so if you're thinking about, oh, I wanted to see that research again, it's coming to you and you will have access to those. All right. So one last item here, just as a quick point. If you're feeling a little bit defeated by seeing like, oh my gosh, attrition rates of up to 50% and students, only 30% of them staying who don't make a gain. Yeah, that can feel defeating. But remember, you as a teacher do have choices that you get to make. Even within your own programmatic constraints, there are choices that you get to make to influence student retention so that you can have an impact. And I'm really grateful. My colleague Amber is going to take over and she's going to give you these specific strategies you can start applying in your classroom to help make this a reality for you. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend Amber and let her take it from here. And you guys can keep up that conversation in the chat. We'll be so happy to hear from you. Great. Amber, I'll give it to you.
There we go. For a second, it seems like my mouse wasn't working. So thank you so much. You know, I love looking at the research, but I see where all the participants are going already with okay, so what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And I think the purpose of front loading that retention research is to show you, like what Anita was talking about, right? That this is a national issue that we're all working towards. It's not, one or the other. Tacos are also a really big motivator. So, and I like Jan, she puts in the chat, my students like to bring food to share. I realize that, yes, you cannot purchase money, use money from your program usually to buy food for students, but who doesn't like tacos, right? So I kudos to whomever started with that. But there's so much activity in the chat and I love seeing it. Just to reiterate what Anita said, in case somebody missed it, you will be receiving a recording of this presentation, a PDF of the slides, which have live links to our research that we did. We didn't do this from the top of our brains. We want to give kudos to those that helped us along with putting this presentation together. And so you will get a PDF of the slides and a recording after this session. I'm not sure if it'll be today or tomorrow, but you will get an email with the recording and the PDF of the slides so that you can share this information with your instructors or your colleagues. So what can I do? We realize again that this is bigger than just us as teachers, but we're going to look at just within my little classroom, what can I do to influence student retention? There's been some great ideas already in the chat, and we're going to break these down based on some of the research that we did for this presentation. So in your classroom or outside of it, we're shifting gears here to think about how can you lead, encourage, teach, and help to be a change maker in adult education. What does that look like? Right? What does that look like for you? So we also have a Padlet of resources that you'll be able to access at the end of the presentation. So in the Padlet, as well as it linked in the slides, is this report from the Florida Department of Education survey results. This was dated in 2020. So likely the research was done, prior to our pandemic here too. And the question was asked of teachers, what do teachers say impacts retention? The question that was asked was, what are the most important practices in retaining students? And these were the 4 categories. And obviously these don't add up to 100%. So this was, you could choose more than one option, right? But these were the top contenders. So these are the 4 areas that we are going to focus on today a little bit today for the remainder of our presentation. The first, student engagement and motivation. Positive and collaborative student and teacher interactions. Notice that's not just positive, but also collaborative. Multiple instructional approaches and student goal setting. So let's talk about each one of these a little bit here. What do we mean by student engagement and motivation? We all know that it's impossible to instill intrinsic motivation in a student who doesn't have it already, right? But what we can do is explain and model that kind of motivation, encourage it in students, and create an environment where it can flourish. So think about, some of you have already put so many great things in here, but think about what is one way you have tried to motivate a student who appeared unmotivated. Oh, Alejandro, reinforce positive self-talk. That's a huge one, right? You have to model it and encourage it, right? Sometimes even icebreakers, word games, a WhatsApp group, build a relationship. Yes, yes. Tacos, that was something mentioned earlier. Use their name. Yes, something as simple as using their name. I think about my own children when they're being coached in their sports, and if the coach knows their name or not, can really they get a different response from my child if they feel like the coach knows their name. Why wouldn't that apply in the classroom, right? All right, so as you're continuing to put that in, perhaps you find increasing student engagement a more realistic goal than increasing student motivation. If so, what type of student engagement would you like to see happening in your classroom? And then what steps do you need to encourage that? And that's more of a rhetorical question, right? But the idea of engaging your students can look different for each student, right? In different students engage in content and engage with the instructor and engage with other students in different ways. But the idea of engaging a student isn't just to make your lessons flashy, right? A lot of people jump to use a video, get on TikTok, do whatever's trendy. And those things can be engaging, right? Same as tacos and candy, right? Those can be engaging. But also, we're going to talk a little bit about what kind of works for everyone, regardless of whether the student likes tacos or the student likes TikTok, right? The useful, and this is where this quote comes from some more research that we did that says, the usefulness of what is learned generally is a greater influence on adults' motivation to learn than it is intellectual value. So the more new material is contextualized and the students can see its importance and utility, the greater the motivation to learn it. This is a very basic andragogy principle, right? The idea of teaching adults, yes, but is that they need to have their hands in the learning. They need to see how it connects to their life or to life in general, how it connects to outcomes. They need to see that. I'm sure you've heard many times the statement or something like the statement of, is this going to be on the GED, or is this going to be on the test? Or sometimes they come back from taking a test and they say, nothing you're teaching me is on the test. Well, we need to make sure that, number one, what we're teaching is on the test. It should be, right? But also, are the students seeing that line from A to B, right? Are they seeing how the test is connected to the classroom, which is connected to their bigger goal of whatever that is, right? So they need to see that, and then they need to see, how am I making progress along that line? We have to draw that straight line. And I'll tell you, when I say draw that straight line, I mean it. I mean, say it, write it on the board, make them draw the line. And I don't mean just from A to B, but rather show them how this is done, because for some students, they don't see these connections. And so we really have to teach them how to see what they're learning in their classroom and how it's connected to their life, not just supply examples from their life, but from their possible life, but also connect them. Yes, yes. So there's a little bit about student engagement and motivation. What do we mean by positive, collaborative teacher-student interactions? Remember the data that we looked at earlier. The majority of students leave within the first 2 to 3 weeks of attending class. And this is true in my class, it's true in Anita's. We've bonded so much over this topic because of the likenesses within our classroom. So what do we need to be doing during the first class session and the first week and the first month, right? A study done at a 2-year college in Texas showed that the drop rates in classes decreased dramatically when teachers did simple things like interact with students by name within the first week of class, which many of you have already said in the chat. They've monitored individual student progress and intervene when necessary, and they would meet occasionally with students one-to-one to discuss progress and their experience. Positive interactions can be simple, but they need to be intentional. Yes, I love all the things I'm seeing in the chat. You guys help us so much with this, with the making the case for this, and also what you're doing, and you're helping your colleagues so much too. I also want to highlight that not just positive interactions, but also collaborative interactions, showing that you are on that student's team, and it is very much a team, right? There's a give and take between you both, the teacher and the students with other students. That's another piece that I know a lot of people have hinted on in the chat already is creating community within the adult education classroom. Students who feel connected to the classroom or to the teacher or to the other students in the class tend to be retained for a longer period of time. And so sometimes that happens naturally. I've had classes where there's kind of a leader in the group or a couple leaders, and they kind of take over and take everybody under their wing, and they just become this community. But I've also had classes where everybody is kind of coming in independently. They're very focused on what they have going on, and they're not really that interested. I've even had students tell me, I'm not really interested in getting to know other people. And that's fine, but that means with that student, I need to have an interaction with them that's positive and also collaborative, so they understand and feel like they belong there and they belong in a learning place. Yes, yes. So not just, and also this doesn't just mean teacher to student, but also student to student. And when I first kind of came upon this idea of collaborative teacher-student interactions, I first started thinking about this as me to the student to me. But then I realized that the activities that are most successful in my classroom are actually the ones where my students are interacting with each other. And like most adults, you guys included, we like to learn from each other, not just from one person. I'm the teacher in this webinar, right, if you will. But look at all the information that's being shared in the chat that is so valuable for all of our learning. So student to student and teacher to student interactions that are positive and collaborative. Ooh. That was me clicking on the PDF within the slides. So there you go, you know it's linked. What do we mean by multiple instructional approaches? So instructional approaches in the classroom, virtual or otherwise, vary due to teacher preference, teaching background, materials being used in the classroom. Think about your own preferences for how you like to learn. And is it possible that you tend to use this same instructional approach repeatedly, regardless of whether it's necessarily effective for all of your adult learners? That's natural. It's natural to think this is the way I think, so maybe somebody else will think that way too. This is the way I learned, so somebody else has to learn this way, right? It's important to switch it up. Now, that doesn't mean run your classroom like a chaotic subway train, right? It just means switching it up and remembering these principles of andragogy. So the way adults learn. If you look at this beautiful pyramid here, we have the learning pyramid, passive and active learning, and the average retention rate based on the instructional approach. So you have every scope from lecture to reading, audiovisual, demonstration, discussion group, practice by doing, teaching others, or immediate use. Adults need to know why they're learning something. They need to learn by doing, even if they're making mistakes. That's when we learn the most, right? And they learn best when the subject is of immediate use. And I feel like sometimes in the ESL classroom, this can be pretty, not easy, but can be pretty easy to accomplish because so much of the topics can be related to real life, right? We can find evidence of having to read as safety information for work or something like that. But sometimes we can also get bogged down in some of the, and this happens in both the ELL classroom and the ABE ASE classroom, we can get bogged down in the details of memorizing formulas, memorizing grammar rules, and being able to, spell correctly, right? Not that those skills aren't important, but rather, how are my students moving along this learning pyramid by the type of multiple instructional approach that I'm offering, right? How are they moving? And am I throwing in different pieces of this? Because we all know through universal design for learning that each of these pieces can really open up doors for students to learn in different ways and might be just the ticket to kind of helping them see their progress as you go forward. What do we mean by goal setting? And I will tell you, I personally am not good at goal setting. I'm good at knowing what I want to do, but I'm not good at that follow-up piece. And I mean that in my own personal life, but I have had to really change the way that I do this in the classroom based on this research, but also this work that I'm doing within adult education. And what I mean by that is I started helping my students create SMART goals. When I first started having them create SMART goals, it felt painful because they really didn't understand what that meant. And not only understand it, they didn't know how to do it. So we worked with lots of sentence frames. We worked with lots of piecing it together, like having it in 4 different boxes and then combining it into one sentence. And that was very much a lesson in itself. But in addition to these SMART goals, and there's if you are not sure what a SMART goal is, there's links here for you. But a SMART goal, in addition to setting those SMART goals, students can be encouraged to think about how they will achieve those goals or not. And so Anita and I have both worked with different kinds of like graphic organizers or virtual or on paper or activities to get our students to not only set goals, but set measurable goals that lead up to the big goals, right? If the goal is to get to your GED or to learn English to be able to talk to my child's teacher, what are the things before that you might think would lead you to that goal? And those are the pieces that when I said goal setting was painful with some of my students as the teacher, those are the things that my students, they haven't thought about yet. It's not that they don't have the end goal. It's that they might not have the in-between steps. I see somebody saying they can't hear me. Are other people good? Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Another way that Anita and I have both done versions of this or this specifically is a force field analysis. And we kind of think of this as a follow-up to goal setting. Maybe, there's an initial lesson or two about setting your goals and setting those micro goals in between, but then also a force field analysis for our adult students. So the idea, it's linked here in the PDF, but there's four categories. So it's who or what will make that goal hard, who or what will help that goal, are there more positive or negative forces in your life towards attaining that goal, and what are 2 forces that would strengthen or weaken getting to that goal? I really like posing some of these questions for my students because it helps them identify the supports and the challenges they have in their life, as some of those barriers we talked about before often come out. But we also talk about what are some things that are going to strengthen and make that more helpful. How can you make a SMART goal realistic when they are looking for fluency in the first few weeks? I have some ideas, but the first one is to, if you're looking for fluency with reading or fluency with phonics, you can quantitatively assess that, right? You knew this many letters this week, you know this many letters this week, and that's helping you read these words, or helping you read, the note from your boss, or things like that. We could probably have a whole session on that, but Shavana, but that's just my first reaction to that. Yeah. So also a big piece of goal setting that we work with a lot of teachers on is how do we share or revisit those goals, not just once, but more than once? And how do we help our students get to the point where they are revisiting those goals and revisiting this force field analysis? How do we help them look at them, measure them, and remind them of what we're doing and why? And then reassess, right? Reassess those goals as they go forward. So one of the things that we'd like you to do, consider, you guys already put some of these in, but I want you to think about, we're going to do this in a waterfall chat. So hold your chat responses for a second. If you've never done a waterfall chat, It's going to get fast real quick. All right. So here's how a waterfall chat works. There's a question on the screen. You're going to think about your question, type it, but do not hit send or do not hit enter until do not hit enter until I say to. So think about the answer to your question. Which retention efforts in this category would be effective in your classes? So think about student engagement and motivation. We're just asking you to focus on one. Which retention efforts in this category would be effective in your classes? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to type in your response, but don't hit enter yet. And Eric, yes, you will get the slides and the recording after this. It will likely come to you in email either today or tomorrow. All right, go ahead and press send. Let's see those. Oh, look at that. They were waiting.
I love that. I love the waterfall chat.
So after you've pressed enter, I want you to go back up and look. Take a scroll. I'm going to give you the next 30 seconds to kind of scroll through. Scroll through. I wish we had that fun chat feature. I think it's because it's a webinar, that fun chat feature where you can like put an emoji on people's responses, but it doesn't look like that this time. No, this would be a great opportunity to have those, but yeah, celebrate victories. Yes. I'm just shouting out a few of the ones that I'm seeing: community goal building, personal goal setting. You are important. Mantras or things like that to help our students helping each other, be sure they feel success, all of them. An end goal video to share with the class. Love that. Why not differentiate? Let them make their goal setting in paper form, in virtual form, in TikTok form, however they want to do it, right? Keep up with contact. Yeah, Angelo, I sometimes fall short of that one. I'm really great in the beginning of the course, and then I myself get less motivated, and then I have to kind of find a way to re-energize myself and keep contacting and keep texting and keep emailing to help my students. Collaboration, SMART goals, divide the course into smaller units. Yeah, to use students' names. Yes, all of these, amazing. Thank you so much. What's nice about, I mean, we have like almost 400 people on here today. This is just a breeding ground of ideas, right? And I agree. I have a disco ball in my classroom. I turn it on and we dance to the party rock anthem whenever we need to celebrate a success. That is amazing, Joni. I'm in with that. Yes, yes. So a few last ideas here as we wrap up. One of the things that we presented to you at the very beginning was data. And we want to encourage you as a classroom teacher to collect your own data and to analyze your own data. Each term, you should be considering your own individual classroom data, not just the larger program data. Who are you losing? Are you losing a certain age group over semester to semester, or are you, course to course? Are you losing a certain gender? Are you losing a certain type of learner? And then when are you losing them? And this could be specific to the group I previously mentioned, or this could be outside of that question. So when are you losing students? Are you losing them after the first week, after the first class, before day one? Do you tend to have a roster that only half the students are going to show up to begin with? That sounds like a different retention issue than I'm losing them at midterm, right? Are your retention numbers pretty consistent term to term, or are you seeing a big change in your data for some reason? And we encourage you to explore that. Did you try something new one semester over another? Asking yourself these types of questions can help you understand your own retention in your classroom and know which types of retention strategies to apply. Depending on your role in your group, your questions might change, as will your data source as well. So sometimes we need a little bit of quantitative information to help us dig deeper into the qualitative, right? Or into the anecdotal information. And so this can really, help you track attendance already, right? But why not continue to look at the retention pieces and then combine that with what's going on in your classroom? Before we leave you today, we want to make sure that you leave with a few questions. And so what new strategy will you try in your classroom this term, whether it was from our presentation or from the brainstorm here in the chat today? Are there particular students you intend to reach out to now? And do you have your own long-term goal for your semester retention? Those are some of the thoughts we'd like you to take away. If you have questions about our presentation or about us or our classrooms, we'd be happy to share with you, get on a call, or we're great at Zoom and we're great at Google Meet and all kinds of virtual calls. So all of you from all across the country, we'd be happy to get on with you to talk more about this topic. We also, there is a QR code up on your screen right now, or there should be, that has a link to a Padlet of resources. Anita also put the Padlet link in the chat. If you've been like chomping at the bit, as they say, to get the PDF of the slides, there is a PDF of the slides on this Padlet. I will talk to Bethel, our COABE representative, about being able to save the chat and sending that with the COABE presentation. I'm not sure if that's a possibility, but I see a couple requests for that.
I can save it, so I will, and we will ask them to send it along with the slides. I think that's a great idea.
Yes,
yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So you can access that link to Padlet. I will say that there's more on the Padlet link than just this presentation. This is our COABE Padlet where we store all of our presentation information. So we want to make sure that you have the resources, and I know that Bethel will send everything out. If there's a certificate, the recording, the PDF of the slides, I know COABE is on top of that, and I usually that comes out like the day of or the day after in my experiences.
Yes,
the template,
it will be 24 hours following the live webinar.
Great.
So just look for it in your email. Yes.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for everyone for being here. We were so happy to present for you, and we hope to see you at other COABE events or other events. Thank you so much, and thank you for being a champion for your adult learner. Have a great day.
Thank you all for being here and for your participation in the chat. I learned so much from all of you and reading all of your ideas, so we hope you feel the same. Thank you, guys.